Imagine waking up to a world without air conditioning, central heating, or indoor plumbing. A world ruled by the fiery sun, where every breath tastes of dust and every step sinks into shifting sand. Welcome to ancient Egypt, land of pyramids, pharaohs, and power, but also of blistering heat, swarms of biting flies, and backbreaking labor. Today we dare to ask why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. Strap in, because by the time you're done listening, you'll be grateful to live in the 21st century. Our journey begins before dawn. No gentle alarm clock or softly glowing smartphone screen here, just the oppressive darkness, the distant bleating of goats, and the low rumble of the Nile's floodwaters. You roll out of bed, or rather, off a reed mat on a hard clay floor, rubbing the grit from your eyes. As sunlight creeps over the horizon, you realize the temperature is already climbing. Welcome to an environment that doesn't care if you're still sleepy. In this video, structured into vivid scenes, morning, work, hygiene, medicine, food, climate, religion, crime and punishment, social class, gender roles, and more, we'll immerse you in the textures, sounds, and stench of daily life. You'll meet peasants laboring under a merciless sun, slaves chiseling granite, artisans mixing pigments in cramped workshops, nobles drifting through luxuriant gardens, priests chanting in dark sanctuaries, and yes, even the pharaoh himself perched atop his gilded throne. Throughout, our tone will be equal parts engaging and sarcastic, because, let's face it, if you think modern Monday mornings are rough, wait until you hear about the Nile fly infestation, the public latrine lineup, and the expectation that you'll haul multi-ton stones before lunch. By highlighting smells of rancid fish, the relentless buzzing of flies, the dangers of crocodile-infested waters, and the brutal lash of an overseer's whip, we'll show you exactly why a modern person would fold within hours, or less. So, grab a drink, preferably iced and from a sealed bottle, settle in, and prepare to be transported back 4,000 years. And remember, at any point, if you start craving an 8-hour sleep cycle, a hot shower, or an ice-cold soda, well, that's the point. Let's begin our odyssey through sunrise, in ancient Egypt. You awaken on a patchwork of reed mats that pass for bedding among the rural peasantry. There's no soft mattress, just stiff reeds woven together and topped with a bit of animal hide for minimal comfort. Your back aches immediately. Your feet hit the hard-packed mud and straw floor, cold at dawn, soon to become scorching by midday. It's around 4:30 a.m., just as the first rosy light hits the eastern sky. There's no rooster crowing, rather the mournful bleat of goats and the low thunder of the Nile's waters. If you're lucky, the river's flood has reached your fields, depositing fresh silt. Lucky, because that silt ensures another year's harvest. Unlucky, because you'll spend the next 12 hours standing knee-deep in muck, planting seed by seed by seed. Your clothes are simple, a coarse, undyed linen kilt, rough on the skin, held by a leather belt that rubs raw in the heat. No underwear, no socks, and certainly no sandals unless you can afford them. Barefoot is the norm. You head outside, only to be greeted by swarms of Nile flies clustering around your eyes and mouth. Tiny black dots that bite, leaving red welts that itch for days. A tiny breeze offers little relief. The air already feels as thick as soup. You shuffle to gather your cooking fuel, dried sticks and reeds, fuel that will burn smelly smoke all morning. A neighbor's child scampers by, carrying a small clay flask of water. It's cloudy from silt, lukewarm, and still precious. One misstep, and you risk scalding yourself, lighting the morning porridge. Citrus and coffee are millennia away. Breakfast will consist of bland barley gruel, flecked with chopped leeks if you're lucky. By 5 a.m., you're seated on a low stool, spooning porridge that tastes of dust and starchy grit. Around you, children pick at the same bowl, faces smeared with brown slush. The stench of cooking fish drifts from the neighbor's courtyard, fish often gone sour in the heat. You swallow, hoping the coarse grains will give you enough energy to avoid collapse under the rising sun. And already, there's no turning back. The overseers will arrive at first light to march you off to the fields. Welcome to the beginning of a day that modern you wouldn't survive an hour of. Contrast that with the dawn of a noble's palace. At 5:30 a.m., heavy linen curtains are drawn back by servants to reveal the pink-gold sunrise reflecting off the Nile. You recline on a wooden bed, inlaid with ivory and gold leaf, mattress padded with wool stuffed into linen sacks. Silk pillows scented with lotus oil cradle your head. Two handmaidens fan you with palm fronds laced with fragrant oil. Sandalwood, myrrh, and frankincense mingle in the air. The palace floor of polished limestone remains cool underfoot, a luxury unimaginable in the peasant's earthen hut. A chorus of servants brings bowls of fresh figs, bread rolls topped with sesame seeds, and chilled goose's milk. Ice? No, but jars of water stored underground keep beverages surprisingly cool. A slave anoints your skin with perfumed oils to guard against the sun's blistering rays. Another applies light kohl around your eyes, warding off Nile flies and reducing glare. Yet, for all its ease, the noble's morning still hums with tension. Political intrigue simmers below the surface. Was your promotion yesterday a favor from the vizier, or a trap set by your rival? The ease of luxury comes with its own weight. As the palace gates open, chariots roll up to the courtyard. You emerge, adorned in fine white linen robes, sandals of dyed leather, and gold jewelry heavy enough to leave dents in your skin. The scent of blossoming date palms and lotus flowers envelops you, a stark contrast to the smell of sweat and livestock in the village. But remember, this golden world relies on the sweat and labor of thousands. And outside these walls, the world still burbles with the Nile's insects and dangers that could kill in an afternoon. By 6 a.m., peasants are already at work in the fields. The Nile's receding floodwaters have left a patchwork of fertile black silt that must be sowed before the sun reaches its zenith. You shoulder a wooden hoe, heavy and unbalanced, and stoop to scrape soil, planting seeds one at a time. Your back cramps after the first hour. No ergonomic tools here, only brute force. The overseer rides along in a small boat on the irrigation channel, shouting ancient Egyptian commands. Ka-em nader, work quickly or facing the stick. A few unlucky souls are lashed for lagging behind or for ending up in the water instead of sowing. Slavery isn't always marked by chains. Forced labor is a common alternative punishment for criminals or tax defaulters. By mid-morning, the sun is a burning orb overhead. Temperatures soar above 40 degrees, 104 degrees. Sunstroke, heat exhaustion, and dehydration stalk every worker. The only break is a gulp of Nile water, cloudy, taste of mud, potentially carrying disease. Schistosomiasis, bilharzia, malaria. The water is a petri dish of pathogens, yet you drink because without water, you collapse. Meanwhile, the tomb builders on the outskirts of Giza heave limestone blocks weighing 2 tons, dragging them on sledges through the sand. Their torches flicker in the smoky twilight of rock-cut quarries. They chisel away with copper tools that need constant sharpening. Dust fills their lungs, and the slightest crack in the stone can mean renegotiating months of labor. The clock never stops. Noon heralds no respite. Only by the grace of your taskmaster might you pause for a handful of flatbread and a sip of beer. Nutrient-rich, but alcohol content so low, you'll need to drink liters to feel it. Then it's back to toil until the sun dips low. In this world, rest is a scarce commodity, and modern notions of break time are a fantasy. By mid-afternoon, sweat soaks your linen kilt, turning it into a clammy prison against your skin. You long for a refreshing wash, but in ancient Egypt, bathing is a chore, both for nobles and commoners, and rarely daily. Peasants share a communal basin of water drawn from the Nile. Nobles have carved limestone tubs in their courtyards, but staunch Egyptian water etiquette dictates a single use before it's discarded. Imagine dunking your dusty feet into a shallow pool of water that reflects the blazing sun and hoping it's clean. Tiny black Nile flies dive bombing your ankles guarantee that relief will be short-lived. After splashing, you rub yourself down with a paste made of natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate and fine clay. It stings minor cuts and abrasions, but its gritty texture scrubs at your skin like sandpaper. Toilet facilities are as rudimentary as the rest of life. In a peasant's home, a privy might be a shallow pit outside, covered by a plank. Expect knock-knock etiquette. Neighbors approach, mumble a greeting, and wait their turn. Noble households boast stone latrines built into palace walls, but smell is overpowering. The courtyard breeze carries the stench of human waste mixed with dripping urine. No sewage system carries waste away. It simply decays nearby, attracting swarms of flies and rats. Nobody brushes teeth with minty paste. Instead, they chew on twigs, frayed at one end to work like a toothbrush, and rinse with water that tastes faintly of fish. Ear cleaning involves a thin bronze tool. If you slip, you risk puncturing your eardrum. Nail cleaning is done with sharpened reeds, and hair is combed with wooden picks carved from sycamore. Shaving is a luxury. Most men keep matted beards or close-cropped stubble. The few barbers available use bronze razors you'd hesitate to touch. Any nick in the skin leads to infection. Antibiotics are centuries away. If you're sick, maggots from flies can invade wounds, and the nearest healer uses spells and herbal concoctions, not sterile gauze. Modern soap is centuries away, replaced here by perfumed oils, lotus, myrrh, and cedar, meant more to mask stench than to cleanse. By the time you've scrubbed and anointed yourself, the sun has begun its descent. Your skin still smells faintly of fish. The basin water ripples with flecks of dust, and the putrid odor of nearby latrines lingers in your nostrils. Even the simplest act of hygiene is a gamble. Consume water teeming with parasites, risk an infection from a bronze blade, or simply be devoured mentally by the ceaseless buzzing of insects. It's enough to make a 21st century person scream for a shower, a toothbrush, and a roll of toilet paper. All luxuries unimaginable here. As the sun dips toward the horizon, a whisper of relief wafts through the air. But illness doesn't take a break. In ancient Egypt, disease is as constant as the Nile's flow, and medicine is less science than a blend of herbal lore, magic incantations, and a dash of pragmatism. Meet Nebu, the local healer, who sits cross-legged on a reed mat inside a smoke-filled hut. His walls are lined with dried bundles of thyme, juniper berries, and malachite jars of crushed minerals. He begins by reciting a spell to the god Thoth, invoking divine wisdom to guide his treatment. Then he sets to work preparing a poultice of crushed garlic, honey, and natron clay to draw out infection from festering wounds. A remedy surprisingly antiseptic, yet its application sticks to your skin like a layer of wet cement. Bitten by a scorpion, Nebu grinds up the very scorpion's leg, mixing it with mud, reasoning that like cures like. Though modern medicine would wince, some such treatments do relieve swelling, but fall sick with malaria or schistosomiasis from that river water, and your chances plummet. The most a healer can offer is willow bark tea, ancient aspirin, or a ritual involving incense and prayer to Sekhmet, goddess of healing and disease. If the gods aren't appeased, the illness may linger or turn fatal. Bloodletting exists too, with copper razors used to nick veins and drain bad blood, often leaving you weaker than before. Children born with cleft palates receive no surgical repair. Deformed infants might be left exposed, their mortality rate shockingly high. Dental care consists of drilling with bow drills, no anesthetic, creating agony so intense that sufferers may refuse treatment altogether. Pharaoh's court has better resources. Physicians specialize in eye diseases, digestive issues, and bone fractures. They use linen splints soaked in resin to immobilize broken limbs, a practice surprisingly effective. Royal tombs have revealed prosthetic toes carved from wood, demonstrating an astonishing grasp of prosthetics. Yet, even nobles can't escape pestilence. Smallpox, measles, and leprosy ravage populations with no vaccine in sight. As dusk settles, you realize that the most potent medicine in ancient Egypt might simply be luck. A modern person, faced with contaminated water, venomous creatures, and limited pharmacology, would find survival a precarious game of chance. And when the healer's hut is miles away, your fate rests on whether you can drag yourself there before your strength gives out. In a world where infection kills faster than spears, even one day is a high-stakes gamble. As darkness finally cools the air, your stomach reminds you that eating in ancient Egypt is an adventure in scarcity and flavorless staples. For peasants, the day's main meal arrives after sunset. A thick, coarse loaf of flatbread made from emmer wheat, broken apart and dipped into a communal bowl of watery stew. This stew might contain lentils, chickpeas, or dried beans, luxuries compared to the daily barley gruel. On festive days, a few salted fish caught from the Nile are added, but spoilage is a constant threat. Fish left in the sun for an hour can reek like rotten eggs, attracting flies that swarm and land in every crevice of the pot. Every bite feels gritty with sand and dust tracked in on bare feet. Peasants wash their bread in unfiltered river water, cloudy, brown, and teeming with microorganisms. The goal is to soften the bread, not to drink clean water. Thirst is assuaged by a thin, sour beer brewed at home. This beer, more nutritive than intoxicating thanks to its low alcohol content, is strained through woven baskets, but still carries husks of grain, yeast strands, and a hint of musty mold. You gulp it down, hoping it kills fewer parasites than it fosters. Artisans and scribes enjoy a slightly better diet. Extra servings of onions and garlic, known for supposedly warding off disease, and jars of dates soaked in honey for sweetness. They snack on roasted chickpeas, which crackle between the teeth like oversized popcorn, and occasionally find a hard-boiled egg among the scraps set aside by a temple's kitchen. But none of this resembles modern snacking. Spoilage, infestation by weevils, and rationing mean that every bite is precious and potentially stomach-turning. Nobles dine in opulent courts, their tables groan under platters of grilled river fish, seasoned with coriander, cumin, and dried slices of pomegranate, flavors that dazzle through the haze of dust. Roasted duck, goose, and cuts of beef are served on fresh lettuce leaves, garnished with sprigs of dill and parsley. Fruit bowls overflow with grapes, figs, and date clusters. Wine flows more freely than water. Clay amphorae of red and white are uncorked, the air rich with the aroma of fermented grapes. Yet every cup carries the risk of lead contamination from glaze, and sleepless nights if the wine is poorly stored. Pharaoh's banquets reach mythical heights. Silken pillows surround low tables set with exotic spices imported from Punt. Cinnamon, frankincense, and rare myrrh used in both cooking and ceremony. Kiwi fruit and pomegranates glint like jewels under oil lamps. Musicians play harps and flutes as courtiers feast, tossing bones and shells to children who scramble like scavenging jackals. For one night, riches of flavor eclipse the harsher realities beyond palace walls. But by dawn, the baker's boy will resume grinding grains, and common folk will still chisel stones for the next pyramid block. In this world, your modern palate would revolt. You'd crave fresh produce, polished cutlery, filtered water, and a Starbucks latte on the side. Instead, you face dusty flatbread, rancid fish, gritty beer, and endless hunger. And that's if you're lucky enough to eat at all. Even a single day could break your spirit, when every mouthful is a gamble against illness, pests, and sheer unrelenting scarcity. The ancient Egyptian climate is a masterclass in extremes, a relentless oven by day, and a surprisingly cold desert by night. As dawn bleeds into midday, temperatures routinely climb above 40 degrees, 104 degrees dust, baking everything from mud brick walls to the exposed skin of laborers. The sun is a ruthless tyrant. No clouds offer shade, and any breeze dancing across your face feels like a blast from a kiln. Imagine standing in the open, your sweat-soaked linen sticking to your back as you struggle to haul a waterlogged basket of silt. Every inhalation tastes of dry, powdery dust rising from the fields. Tiny grains slip into your mouth, nose, and eyes, causing constant irritation and coughing fits that leave you gasping for the scarce relief of cleaner air. Clothes, once white or natural-colored linen, yellow and stiffen after weeks of unrelenting sunlight. At dusk, the temperature can plummet by as much as 20 degrees, 36 degrees, especially in the desert regions beyond the Nile's banks. You shiver under a thin woolen cloak, no insulated jackets here, and curse the biting chill that feels like needles against your skin. You scramble to relight the fire used earlier for dinner, but damp reeds and scarce tinder make even that simple task a chore. Beyond the daily heat cycle, the Nile's annual flooding reshapes life. From June to September, the river overflows its banks and spreads nutrient-rich silt across fields. Peasants navigate knee-deep water to plant seeds, while families build homes on raised platforms to avoid inundation. Flood season brings fresh water, but also disease. Stagnant water becomes breeding grounds for mosquitoes carrying malaria, and shifting channels can hide crocodiles that seize the unwary. During the dry season, from October to May, the desert reclaims farmland with sandstorms that roll in without warning. A wall of yellow grit surges across the horizon, swallowing villages in minutes. You find yourself squinting through a veil of dust, lungs filling with dark particles, every breath a fight. Houses are plastered with mud to keep the sand out, but cracks form, and you spend half your day sweeping dunes from doorways and storerooms. Then there are the rare but devastating rainstorms. Infrequent cloudbursts pound riverbanks, washing away mud brick walls and flooding courtyards. With no drainage, water pools in low spots, carrying sewage and debris, you wade through ankle-deep muck to salvage tools and grain jars, while rats and snakes flee the rising water into your home. In this environment, your modern comforts, air conditioning, insulation, filtered air, are luxuries beyond imagining. Without them, every breath, every drop of sweat, every step across the sun-cracked earth is a trial by fire. Surviving a single day under this sky would feel like traversing a crucible, one that spares neither body nor spirit. Religion in ancient Egypt isn't a Sunday pastime. It's the very fabric of reality. Every sunrise is a ritual reenactment of Ra's birth, and every sunset a descent into the duat, the shadowy underworld. As a commoner, you wake before dawn to pour the first of many libations on a small household shrine carved into your mud wall. A mixture of water, beer, and grains offered to household gods like Bez or Taweret. You whisper a quick prayer, "Please spare my family from illness and crocodiles today," and move on. Priests, however, live in cloistered temple complexes that span acres. Here, rituals follow rigid schedules. Dawn chant, mid-morning sacrifice of oxen, midday hymns, evening offering of incense. Incense burns in giant braziers, filling chapels with fragrant clouds of myrrh and frankincense, masking the smell of animal fat and rotting offerings. Priests wear pristine white linen robes and linen sandals that have never felt mud. Their heads are shaved, and kohl lines their eyes to ward off the glare of sunlight, and the envy of the gods. For you, religion can be both comfort and threat. Festivals draw entire villages to temple courtyards, where dancers in leopard skins imitate Sekhmet's fury. Feasts follow, but under the watchful eye of the priests, stepping out of line, shouting during the rite of Osiris, or spilling beer on a sacred statue, can land you a fine or conscription as temple labor. Temples tower with massive columns carved in the likeness of papyrus bundles, their walls plastered in vivid reds, blues, and gold leaf. You trail your fingers across hieroglyphs, telling of pharaohs crossing into the afterlife, demanding offerings in perpetuity. Every tomb, every statue, every grain of sand is imbued with divine significance. Even the simplest thing, going to the latrine, can become a spiritual trial. You might murmur a short prayer to Thoth, patron of scribes and knowledge, to ensure the act is recorded favorably in your book of the dead. Death looms constantly, mummification, elaborate funerary rites, and endless offerings to keep your spirit alive in the afterlife. Fail to prepare properly, and your soul risks dissolving into oblivion. For a modern skeptic, this all sounds like theater, until you stand beneath a soaring hypo-style hall and feel the weight of centuries. Hear the echo of priests chanting in ancient tongues. Smell the strange blend of incense and decay. In a society where the gods govern every drop of water and grain of sand, disbelief isn't an option. It's a death sentence. And for a rational modern mind thrust into this world, the psychological strain of living under constant divine scrutiny could unravel one's sanity well before sunset. In ancient Egypt, the law is as unyielding as the desert rock and carry out a crime, and you risk a punishment so brutal that your modern concept of due process ceases to exist. Justice isn't blind, it's swift, public, and often deadly. Imagine you're a peasant who accidentally cuts into your neighbor's field, or takes a few extra sheaves of grain to feed your starving family. Neighbors turn you in, you're dragged before the local nomarch, governor, or a community council of elders. There's no jury, no formal defense, just witnesses whose word carries weight if they know you. If judged guilty, you may be forced to pay double the value stolen in grain, hand over livestock, or, if you cannot pay, become bonded labor for up to 3 years. Debtors sometimes work off their fines hauling mud bricks under the same sun that baked your stolen wheat. Stealing from a temple? That's sacrilege, an affront to the gods themselves. And the priesthood wields power over life and death. Punishments range from public flogging to impalement on a sharpened stake outside the temple walls. To deter grave robbers, tombs are booby-trapped with hidden pits filled with spikes and inscribed curses promising eternal torment. If you dare break in, you may suffer an immediate death, and rumors say your soul will wander the underworld forever, denied rest. More serious crimes, murder, arson, rebellion, are met with the harshest sentences. Men found guilty of premeditated murder might be executed by decapitation, their heads displayed on poles at the city gates as a warning. Women can face mutilation, ears or nose cut off, for certain transgressions like adultery, leaving them marked for life. The overseer of a labor gang who fails to control slaves or peasants can be thrown into the very quarry he supervised, left to the jaws of crocodiles lurking in the water. The concept of imprisonment as a sentence barely exists. Prisons are holding cells for suspects, not places for long-term detention. Once judged, the penalty is carried out almost immediately. Torture is sometimes used to extract confessions. Red-hot pokers, hypo-style hall electrodes. Okay, perhaps not electrodes, but hacks of searing metal pressed against skin. Or binds so tight that limbs go numb. Confession under torture is considered proof of guilt. Yet this system also breeds corruption. Bribes, gifts of grain, beer, and jars of scented oil grease the wheels of justice. A wealthy artisan might slip a few rings of gold into a scribe's palm and emerge with a reduced sentence or escape charges entirely. For the poor, no such recourse exists. The law is a weapon wielded by the powerful. By nightfall, you realize you've crossed a line simply by living. Every action monitored, every misstep punishable by loss of freedom, body, or life itself. Your modern ideals of fairness evaporate in the desert heat, replaced by a stark realization. In ancient Egypt, a single mistake could doom you before the moon has even risen. Ancient Egypt is not a meritocracy, it's a rigid pyramid where your birth decides your fate. Literally, the shape of your afterlife-seeking tomb. At the apex stands the pharaoh, a living god whose words shape law, religion, and economy. Below him, an elite class of nobles and high priests wield immense power, their lives cushioned by wealth, political connections, and the labor of thousands. Next come the scribes and artisans, literate, skilled professionals who command respect and slightly better rations. A scribe's day consists of inscribing tax records and copying religious texts, each stroke of the reed pen sealing your status. Artisans carve statues, paint tomb walls, and craft jewelry. Their work is in demand, but so is their compliance. Underpaid and underfed, they live in cramped villages near quarries and workshops, yet enjoy intermittent praise when a temple or noble commissions their handiwork. Beneath them, tenants and craftsmen eke out a living as peasant farmers, herders, bakers, brewers, and brickmakers. They pay most of their harvest in taxes to the state and temple, leaving little for themselves. During the inundation season, when fields flood, they swap tools for oars, rowing boats to transport grain and stone. Any failure, poor yield, illness, or delayed labor is met with harsh penalties, while healthy surplus enriches only the upper classes. At the bottom are slaves and bonded laborers, captives of war, criminals, or debtors who toil without pay. They build pyramids, carve obelisks, and haul stone for royal monuments. Though some earn minimal privileges, extra rations, rudimentary housing, most live in shacks of mud brick, drenched in dust and sweat. Their lives are measured in quotas: finish your assigned stones by sunset or face the whip. Social mobility is nearly impossible. A commoner's plea to become a scribe requires unlikely patronage. The gulf between classes is reinforced by law. Intermarriage between a noble and a peasant child would be scandalous, forbidden by custom if not explicitly by decree. Each class has its own clothing, hairstyle, and even speech patterns. Peasant children are taught simple proverbs, while aristocratic offspring learn elaborate praise poems for the gods. Yet, paradoxically, this hierarchy sustains the state. Peasants feed the elite, artisans glorify the gods and pharaohs, scribes record it all, and slaves build the monuments that define Egypt's power. It's an interlocking machine fueled by social stratification, where any disruption, crop failure, slave revolt, or bureaucratic collapse could topple the carefully balanced order. For a modern individual accustomed to choice and social fluidity, this world feels like a chokehold. You'd spend your entire life trapped in one stratum, your potential measured in grain quotas and the weight of stone blocks hauled. Surviving one day might be possible. Surviving a lifetime would crush your spirit under the heel of an immutable class system. In ancient Egypt, gender roles are strict yet paradoxically flexible in certain spheres, and both men and women face their own brand of relentless expectation. As the sun climbs higher, a peasant woman named Merit moves through a choreography of survival. Before dawn, she sloshes water from the Nile to the hut's yard, sluicing away yesterday's dust. Then she grinds grain between two stones, her arms burning with exertion, to prepare the family's morning porridge. Her husband, Abju, will leave shortly to tend the fields, but Merit's workday has only begun. By mid-morning, Merit hauls baskets of fresh clover to feed the household's goats, fetches reeds for weaving mats, and tends an herb garden where she cultivates coriander, dill, and medicinal aloe. She balances this with childcare, burping a wailing infant soothed by sweetened date syrup, and occasionally joins neighbors to pound papyrus into fine shreds they'll sell at the market for a handful of copper rings. All this before the sun's fury drives even the hardiest souls indoors. In contrast, peasant men toil under the sun's full blast, plowing fields, repairing dikes, or navigating boats laden with grain up the irrigation canals. Yet, come evening, Merit and other women gather at communal ovens, shaping and baking flatbreads while gossiping over pots of weak beer. Here, women hold social power, organizing weddings, overseeing grain distribution within extended families, and acting as midwives or herbalists, roles that command quiet respect. Among the elite, noble women enjoy greater freedoms. They own property, inherit wealth, and sometimes serve as priestesses in powerful cults, such as Hathor's temple at Dendera. Letters and tomb inscriptions reveal women like Queen Hatshepsut, who ruled as pharaoh, issuing decrees and sponsoring grand building projects. Even so, these exceptional cases exist within patriarchal norms. Most aristocratic women concern themselves with household management, overseeing dozens of servants, organizing feasts, and commissioning jewelry that signals their status. Men of high rank handle politics, religious office, and warfare. A vizier drafts state correspondence, a general leads campaigns in Nubia, a temple priest reads omens interpreting royal decisions. Masculinity is tied to public achievement and physical prowess, whether in chariot races or hunting expeditions along the Nile's edge, spearing hippos and crocodiles for sport, a pastime that hammers home the pharaoh's role as protector of Mayat, cosmic order. Yet, gender expectations can be brutally unforgiving. Adultery is taboo. A married woman caught in infidelity risks divorce and loss of her dowry. A man may face fines, but retains social standing. Widows often marry relatives or enter temple service to secure food and shelter. Male heirs are preferred. Girls are cherished but regarded as economic liabilities when it comes to dowries and inheritance. For a modern individual, these gender norms might feel equally constricting. Women chained to domestic toil without modern appliances, men compelled toward hazardous labor and risky display. And whether born male or female, every individual's worth is measured by productivity. Grain harvested, cloth woven, temple offerings provided. Under the scorching sun, no one escapes the grinding demands of survival and the tight grip of societal expectation. Beyond human threats, the natural world in ancient Egypt bristles with lethal hazards. Step too close to the Nile's edge, and you risk a stealthy ambush by a crocodile, a massive armored predator whose death roll snaps bones like twigs. Even simple tasks like washing clothes at the riverbank demand constant vigilance. You haul silt-laden linens from the water with one eye on your garments and the other scanning for scaly jaws breaking the surface. Hippos claim the river's deeper channels. Despite their plump bodies and seemingly docile appearance, they are notoriously aggressive, faster on land than you'd expect, and capable of crushing a small boat with their vast, cavernous mouths. At night, when you most need sleep, the low rumble of their breathing echoes through the village, a reminder that your hut stands on territory they consider theirs. On land, venomous creatures lurk in the scrub. Scorpions hide under stones and in sandals left outside your hut. A sting to the foot can ignite excruciating pain and swelling that lasts for days, leaving you hobbling and vulnerable. Snakes, cerastes, and cobra slither through farmland and fields of papyrus. Their bites bring paralysis or fatal hemotoxins if you can't reach a healer in time. Insects swarm with a singular purpose: to feed. Mosquitoes buzz at dusk, carriers of malaria, while tsetse flies in southern regions transmit sleeping sickness. Tiny sandflies burrow into skin crevices, leaving puffy red sores that itch endlessly. Wasps and bees build nests beneath thatch roofs. A stray stone can provoke an angry swarm that chases you across open ground. Birds of prey, kites and vultures circle overhead, drawn to the scent of spilled grain or the prospect of carrion. Their shrill cries punctuate the wind, a constant reminder that even death itself is a spectacle. Scavengers like jackals and hyenas prowl along the dunes after dark, their eerie howls drifting through the desert, sending children trembling beneath blankets of goat hair. And then there are the microscopic terrors. Waterborne parasites like bilharzia and amoebic dysentery lie in wait in every puddle and irrigation ditch. A single sip of fresh Nile water can unleash a weeks-long bout of fever, cramps, and bloody diarrhea. If you survive, your body will be weakened for months. In modern times, we fret over snake bites on safari or losing a phone in the wilderness. In ancient Egypt, every step outside your dwelling is a gamble with predators both great and small. Surviving one day means constant alertness, because in this land, nature itself is an adversary as unforgiving as any human foe. Your linen kilt is hot, abrasive, and scanty, but it's all you own. In ancient Egypt, clothing is dictated by practicality, status, and heat. Peasants wear simple skirts or kilts of coarse, undyed linen, woven from flax grown in their own fields. This fabric breathes, dries quickly, and repels dust, but it's also stiff, prone to tearing, and painfully scratchy against sunburned skin. Around your waist, a narrow leather belt holds tools and a small clay water flask. No pockets exist. Valuables, if you have any, are tied into a cloth bundle slung over your shoulder. Luxury dyes like indigo and madder are reserved for nobles. Rich blues and reds that fade under the relentless sun. Your clothes turn yellow-brown within weeks, and you wash them only when the smell of sweat, fish, and stale beer overwhelms your senses. Footwear is a rare commodity. Many go barefoot, calloused feet digging into sand and stones. If you can afford them, thin-soled sandals of palm fiber or leather protect against scorching ground and venomous scorpions, but straps chafe, and every step risks an ankle twist in the uneven terrain. Jewelry is more than adornment, it's a talisman. Even poor villagers twist copper rings around their fingers, or wear faience beads strung on leather cords, believing that the blue-green glaze invokes the protection of Hathor and Sobek. Wealthier Egyptians layer gold collars and falcon and lotus motifs. Amulets carved from lapis lazuli and carnelian hung over their chests. Each piece is both a status symbol and a spiritual safeguard against disease, snakebite, and malevolent spirits. Storage and domestic wares follow similar patterns. Your clay jars are coarse, fired quickly, and prone to cracking in the desert heat. They sweat with condensation when filled with cooler water, leaving sandy trails across your floor. Nobles' pottery is thin-walled, burnished to a glossy sheen, and painted with scenes of fish, geese, and lotus blooms. Their alabaster jars hold perfumed oils. Their silver platters gleam in torchlight during banquets. Even your tools, wooden hoes, stone sickles, and reed baskets, are extensions of your labor. They splinter, dull, and fail, demanding constant repair or replacement at the local potter's or blacksmith's shop. For a modern person clutching a smartphone or stainless steel knife, it's nearly unimaginable. Here, every object is fragile, every possession temporary, and every day's survival hinges on the integrity of your meager toolkit. After a day weighed down by labor, illness, and the elements, moments of respite are few and fleeting, but they do exist, albeit in forms that might strike a modern person as bleak. Peasants gather around smoky hearths at night, holding flickering oil lamps made from hollowed stones filled with tallow. They tell stories of trickster gods like Anansi, or recount local legends, the tales evolving with each telling, accompanied by the rhythmic beat of simple percussion instruments carved from wood and stretched animal hide. A rare luxury is music, flutes made from reed, rattles of dried gourds, and stringed lyres fashioned from tortoiseshell and animal gut echo softly in village courtyards. You might join in with clapping or foot stomping, but your voice cracks from dust-choked lungs. Drunken revelry follows when communal beer flows. Even this beer is little more than fermented bread mash, so thick and gritty that it's eaten with spoons. Drunken laughter and off-key singing fill the air, cutting through the oppressive silence of dusk. Artisans and scribes enjoy slightly richer pastimes. After work, they stroll through shaded colonnades of temple complexes, observing bas-reliefs and occasionally adding their own inscriptions for practice or prestige. Some gamble with simple knuckle bones, betting copper rings or a jar of honey on chance. Games of probability that rely on the uneven shape of sheep ankle bones to land high or low. Bets are small. No one can afford ruinous losses. Nobles and priests indulge in more elaborate diversions. They host elegant soirees on palace terraces overlooking the Nile, reclining on woven mats with cushions as musicians play lutes and harps. Exotic dancers sway to sacred hymns, their anklets jingling with every movement. Board games like Senate, a race game of 30 squares, serve both as entertainment and spiritual ritual, believed to mirror the soul's journey through the afterlife. Yet leisure is never fully detached from duty. A noble's hunt for game birds or hippos is as much a demonstration of prowess and divine favor as it is sport. Failure can signal weakness before peers and gods. Religious festivals, such as Opet or the Feast of the Valley, draw massive crowds, but require participants to carry statues of deities, perform ritual dances, and donate offerings. In these communal rites, merriment and religious duty intertwine, and exhaustion follows as surely as sunstroke. For a modern person accustomed to cinemas, streaming music, and padded couches, these pastimes feel rudimentary, strenuous, or overtly sacred. There's little space for aimless relaxation. Entertainment here demands participation, effort, and often the promise of divine approval. In ancient Egypt, even play is labor under another name, and the boundary between pleasure and obligation remains blurred until the last lamp gutter flickers out. By the time dusk settles and the last embers in the hearth flicker out, your home, or more accurately, your shelter, stands as a testament to both ingenuity and desperation. Peasant homes cluster in compact villages on the Nile's floodplain, constructed from sun-dried mud bricks that bake into a fragile shell under the scorching sun. Walls are barely half a meter thick, plastered with mud to seal cracks, but each season's flood or sandstorm widens gaps until every breeze whistles through your living space. Roofs are flat platforms of palm trunks overlaid with bundles of reed and mud. They creak ominously when you walk above. And during the flood season, occasional drips of water splash down, reminding you how little separates you from the elements. Windows are narrow slits set high in the walls, too small for airing out smoke, too narrow to let much light in. By midday, the interior is stifling. At night, it cools rapidly, transforming from oven to icebox. Inside, your furniture amounts to low wooden stools and rope-stretched benches, each piece uneven, splintered, and prone to collapse. There's no lock on the door, just a wooden bar you can shift into place, offering minimal security against wandering jackals or thieves desperate for grain. Your kitchen is a single corner of the main room, where a clay hearth smokes incessantly, blackening the low ceiling with soot. You store grains in coarse-woven baskets that invite weevils and beetles, flour grinds to dusty powder on the uneven floor. Water storage is a daily scavenger hunt. Clay jars stand in corners, rims chipped, leaking damp trails. Every morning, you send a child or neighbor to fetch water from the Nile basin, often a mile away in the nearest safe bank. They return with jars of water already flavored by mud, algae, and microorganisms. Without seals or lids, these vessels attract flies and deposit grit along the interior walls. Contrast this with the urban home of a craftsman, a 2- or 3-room townhouse of baked brick, set along narrow lanes crowded with donkey carts and goats. Their roofs might boast a small terrace where linen dries on racks and pigeons roost in purpose-built niches. A courtyard well deepens beneath a wooden canopy, easing water collection. Interiors are painted with red ochre plaster, and simple wooden doors swing on bronze hinges. But even here, stench and sweat seep through door frames, blending with the smoke from communal ovens. In the grandest palaces, marble columns and alabaster columns rise in vast halls supported by cedar beams imported from Lebanon. Tiled floors of glazed faience shimmer beneath the lantern light. Storage rooms hold sealed amphorae of oil, wine, and grain so plentiful that famine seems an abstract concept. But even the pharaoh's granite fortress cannot shield him from dust storms that swirl outside, or the ever-present buzz of flies within. No matter the tier of society, living quarters in ancient Egypt demand constant maintenance and vigilance. Walls crack, thatch ripples, and water seeps. Each flaw is a potential crisis. For a modern person raised on climate control, sturdy housing, and reliable utilities, the relentless battle against the elements alone would be reason enough to surrender before breakfast. In ancient Egypt, the power of the written word is nearly as sacred as the gods themselves. But literacy is a rare privilege, reserved for a tiny elite. Imagine living in a world where the scribbled shopping lists on your fridge are replaced by elaborate hieroglyphic panels carved in stone, where every official decree, religious text, and tax record is written in painstaking detail by hand, and where a single misdrawn symbol can mean the difference between life and death. Peasant children learn only the basics, simple oral proverbs passed down through generations, plus rudimentary counting, how many baskets of grain to load, or how many rows of seed to plant. Reading and writing belong to the scribes, the bureaucratic backbone of the state. Scribes undergo years of rigorous training in temple schools. They copy exercises on ostraka, potsherds, or limestone flakes, with reed pens dipped in carbon-based ink. Their desks are flat slabs balanced on low stands, and their notebooks are bundles of papyrus sheets glued edge to edge, rolled into scrolls. A scribe's day begins before sunrise, cleaning his reed brush by drawing it through clean water. Then, he opens a new scroll. On one side, a practice text in hieratic, the cursive shorthand of hieroglyphs. On the other, a fresh hieroglyphic inscription for official documents. Mistakes are unforgiving. Erasures gouge expensive papyrus, and any corrections must be carefully pasted over. A well-trained scribe writes swiftly, leaving perfectly shaped symbols in even rows, earning him respect and substantial rations of bread and beer. Outside the temple schools, informal writing shops open along major trade routes. Merchants hire itinerant scribes to tally cargo, draft contracts, and inscribe tally sticks. These scribes write in demotic, a further shorthand script used for everyday affairs, on wax-coated wooden boards. Still, even a demotic inscription can take hours to master, and errors can lead to lost shipments or unpaid taxes. Illiteracy doesn't mean ignorance. Oral storytellers travel from village to village, chanting epic tales of Osiris's death and resurrection, or recounting adventurous voyages to Punt. These performances, accompanied by drums and clappers, keep history and religion alive for common folk. Yet, without a written record, details shift from one retelling to the next, creating a tapestry of regional variations. For a modern individual, accustomed to typing emails, sending instant messages, and scrolling through endless social media feeds, the Egyptian communication system feels torturously slow and rigid. There's no delete key, no copy and paste, and certainly no autocorrect. Every message must be composed carefully, with exacting precision, and the slightest slip could summon the wrath of a pharaoh or erase your future fortunes from the official archives. Even if you manage to learn hieroglyphs in a day, an impossibility, you'd still face the sweltering heat that curls your papyrus scroll at the edges, the buzzing flies drawn to the ink, and the dusty wind that coats every surface. Survive that. And your reward is a lifetime of scribing pigeons, taxes, and temple inventories. Hardly the digital dream job you're used to back home. In ancient Egypt, the borders are never truly peaceful lines in the sand, but shifting frontiers patrolled by chariots, archers, and Nile sailors. Although the word pharaoh evokes awe today, that living god spends much of his reign wrestling with Nubian tribes to the south, Libyan raiders to the west, and the Hittites to the northeast. For you, plucked from the 21st century, war means a clash of ideologies. Here, It's a daily grim calculus of grain convoys, deportations, and mass conscriptions. Imagine stumbling onto the training grounds outside Thebes at dawn. Dusty fields strewn with wooden dummies and stone targets. Young men, peasants and craftsmen alike, strap on leather cuirasses and leather helmets, hefting bronze-headed spears heavier than their own torsos. Archers practice loose formations, arrows thudding into reed shields with a sickening smack. You try to knock a bow. The tension in your arms isn't like an Olympic exercise. It's life or death on the battlefield. A single arrow to the throat ends your one-day experiment. Political intrigue tightens the knot around the throat of every soldier and statesman. Advisors whisper of rival factions at court, powerful viziers, ambitious generals, and influential high priests of Amun-Ra, each jockeying for the pharaoh's ear. A misstep in loyalty can lead to exile, execution, or erasure from tomb inscriptions. A fate worse than death for anyone seeking an afterlife. Even lower-ranking soldiers must carry identity tags, small clay plaques inscribed with names and regiments, in case their bodies are lost in foreign deserts. On campaign, life is brutal. You march under the blistering desert sun, carrying rations of hard bread and salted meat. Water skins leak. The only wells are guarded by hostile locals. Sandstorms roll in at midday, forcing you to huddle behind rock outcroppings as wind shears flesh from exposed skin. At night, you sleep under the stars in makeshift camps, the air alive with scorpions and jackals that stalk the wounded. Battles erupt with thunderous roars, chariots thunder across plains, wheels splintering as they collide. Infantry clash in tight phalanxes, shields rattling. Archers on raised platforms rain death from above. Victory means plunder, captive slaves, precious metals, exotic animals, all reinforcing the pharaoh's power back home. Defeat means mass slaughter, the smell of blood permeating the desert air until scavengers and vultures finish what humans start. For a modern observer, used to precision-guided weaponry and satellite surveillance, the sheer chaos of Bronze Age war is terrifying. Without quick medevac, antibiotics, or satellite imagery, survival hinges on skill, status, and sheer luck. In one day, you'll face more mortal peril than many Egyptians encounter in an entire lifetime. And by sunset, even the gods might write you off as another casualty of empire. Beyond the labor gangs and temple precincts, ancient Egypt hums with the energy of commerce. And for a modern person, the absence of digital ledgers and instantaneous transfers turns every transaction into a gamble with fate. In bustling harbor towns like Naucratis or the Red Sea port of Berenike, you find merchants from Punt, Nubia, and the Levant unloading exotic cargo. Ivory tusks, ebony logs, ostrich feathers, lapis lazuli, and frankincense. These goods arrive in wooden dhows or reed boats, steered by crews whose navigation relies on the stars and seasonal monsoon winds rather than GPS. You step onto a rickety dock, the boards slick with fish oil and tannin from rope. Buyers and sellers shout in a babble of dialects, late Egyptian mixed with Phoenician, Greek, and Meroitic. Haggling is performed face to face, eye contact essential. A mispronounced number or a sweaty palm risks losing the deal. To complete a sale, you hand over a weight of chopped grain or copper pieces stamped with the pharaoh's seal. No coins yet. Currency exists in metal ingots, weighed on stone balances with carved stone weights, often shaped like ducks or scarabs to prevent theft. Inland, caravan traders load camel caravans, each animal bearing 2 panniers laden with jars of scented oil and rolls of papyrus. Caravans traverse the western desert to oases like Siwa, linking Egypt with the Saharan trade network. A modern traveler might carry euros or credit cards, but here, a stolen ingot or lost camel is a death sentence. No embassy to call, no insurance policies to file. Merchants hire armed escorts, archers on camelback whose arrows can strike targets at 50 meters, to deter bandits lurking in rocky wadis. City markets unfold at dawn. Produce stands overflow with dates, figs, pomegranates, and small tables piled with onions, leeks, and garlic. Closer to the docks, stalls showcase dyed linen cloth, beads made of faience, and alabaster perfume bottles shaped like lotus buds. Artisans sell small statuettes of Bastet and Horus, carved on site with copper chisels, while scribe shops display wet papyrus samples bound by hemp twine. You handle each item, the oil from your fingers transferring to the surface, a tacit inspection fee exacted by sellers. Record keeping is critical. Scribes inscribe sales on pottery shards or wooden ostraca, noting quantities and prices. While a modern point-of-sale system calculates tax automatically, here you risk double taxation if the state's official scribe arrives after yours. Corruption seeps in. A bribed customs official may let contraband through in exchange for jars of date wine or fine oil. By afternoon's end, the market's cacophony settles into a haze of chatter and haggling. You stash your purchases, a handful of salted fish for dinner, a small jar of natron for cleaning, and a length of linen for a fresh kilt, only to realize you must still haggle the boatman to deliver them home. In this world, every trade is a high-stakes negotiation. Every journey, a test of resourcefulness. For a modern person accustomed to Amazon Prime and ATMs, the absence of instant convenience and the omnipresent risk of theft, spoilage, or political decree would make even a short trip feel like navigating a labyrinth with no exit. No discussion of ancient Egypt is complete without the Nile, the lifeblood of the land and the ultimate arbiter of your survival. Each year, this mighty river swells from June to September, inundating the floodplain with nutrient-rich silt and coaxing the desert back to life. But the flood's timing and height are capricious. Too little water, and your crops parch. Too much, and your village drowns. Farm management revolves around 3 seasons. Ake, the flood, mid-June to mid-October, when you build dikes, repair canals, and plant seeds in knee-deep water. Pare, the growing season, mid-October to mid-February, when fields drain and silty banks sprout barley, emmer wheat, and flax. And Shemu, the harvest, mid-February to mid-June, when scythes slash golden stalks, and every day's yield determines your family's fate. There is no 4th of July picnic here, only a frantic scramble to bend nature to your will. This cycle is tracked by a calendar of 365 days, divided into 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 epagaminal days at year's end, deemed dangerous birthdays of the gods. Without leap years, the calendar drifts against the solar year by roughly 1 day every 4 years, so celebrations eventually wander through the seasons over centuries. For a modern mind accustomed to our precise Gregorian calendar, this drift seems sheer chaos. Imagine planning a harvest festival in what feels like spring, but arrives in the blistering heat of midsummer. Priests and astronomer priests monitor the rising of Sirius, the dog star, whose heliacal rising just before dawn signals the flood's approach. They read the sky like a weather app, interpreting omens in the stars and deacon constellations. Yet no matter how learned, they cannot command the flood, only advise the pharaoh to adjust taxes or redistribute grain accordingly. When the river rises low, famine stalks the land. When it overflows, entire villages are wiped from the map. For you, the Nile is both a fountain of life and a potential destroyer. Drinking from its waters risks parasitic infection. Bathing invites crocodile attacks. Fishing exposes you to hippo territory. But without it, fields bake into powder, and the terracotta bricks of your home crumble in the desert wind. Each day spent in ancient Egypt is a constant negotiation with this unpredictable force, an elemental boss you cannot sidestep, no matter how early you wake or how swiftly you work. In ancient Egypt, death isn't the end. It's the moment when life's trials truly begin. From the humblest peasant to the exalted pharaoh, Every Egyptian must prepare for eternity through mortuary rituals so elaborate they consume the living. Imagine your body becoming raw material for spells, pigments, aromatic oils, and elaborate wrappings, as simultaneously sacred relic and bargaining chip with deities. When a villager dies, relatives hurry to reclaim the corpse before scavengers arrive. They wash it in Nile water, an act of purification that ironically risks further infection. Then pack internal organs into small canopic jars, each under the protection of one of the four sons of Horus. The heart is left inside the body, believed to be the seat of intelligence and the only organ the deceased needs for the judgment in the Hall of Mot. All other organs are disposed of or preserved separately, while the brain is unceremoniously extracted through the nose with hooked rods and discarded. Next comes dehydration. The body is covered in natron salt for up to 70 days, draining moisture and preserving the form. During this period, mourners hold daily lamentations. Women professional wailers chant dirges invoking Isis and Nephthys. The body shrinks and stiffens like a desiccated doll. After salt removal, embalmers anoint the corpse with oils and resins, cypress, cedar, and spikenard, creating a heady, cloying scent that lingers for weeks. Finally, the corpse is wrapped in dozens of yards of linen bandages, each layer accompanied by spells and amulets tucked between folds. Scarab beetles to secure rebirth, the Eye of Horus for protection, spells from the Book of the Dead to guide the soul past demons and through perilous gates. The process takes up to 14 days, longer for the elite. An artisan might spend a month or more decorating the outer coffin, painting vivid scenes of the deceased sailing the solar bark of Ra, or feasting at Osiris's banquet table. Once ready, the mummy travels in grand procession to the tomb, on foot for commoners, by ox-drawn bark for nobles, and on massive wooden or stone sleds for pharaohs. Musicians and mourners wail behind. Priests recite the opening of the mouth ritual to restore the deceased's faculties, and offerings of food, drink, and personal possessions are placed in the burial chamber. Yet the most poignant irony is that many tombs are looted within years. Grave robbers tunnel through desert rock, smashing coffins, stealing gold amulets, and dumping desecrated remains into communal pits. Curses inscribed on walls, threatening eternal damnation, rarely deter them. Thus, your efforts at securing a blessed afterlife often end with your heartless desecration. For a modern person, this obsession with death and the machinery of embalming can feel morbidly theatrical. Imagine spending more time preparing to lie in a silent, sand-filled chamber than you did living under blistering sun and stinging flies. In ancient Egypt, death's bureaucracy is as unforgiving as life's. One misaligned linen strip or incorrect chant, and your soul might wander lost, forsaken by gods who never granted you mercy in life. While the sun's arc dictates the peasant's toil, the ingenuity of Egyptian craftsmen fuels the grandeur of temples and tombs. Yet, for a modern person, marveling at these creations only masks the brutal labor and rudimentary tools that made them possible. Consider the stonemasons who transform raw limestone and granite into towering columns and statues. Copper chisels, hammered on one end, bite into the rock only slowly, flaking off fragments in thin, dusty slivers. Every strike sends shards and grit into the air. Without protective gear, a mason's lungs darken with years of silica-laden dust, and his hands bear scars from misaligned hammer blows. To quarry granite, workers create shallow grooves by pounding wooden wedges into drilled holes, then soak the wood to force the stone apart. The process can take weeks for a single block. Once shaped, colossal stones travel on wooden sledges greased with water and animal fat, sliding over sand wetted to reduce friction. Teams of dozens or even hundreds of laborers haul each sledge while overseers prod them with long canes. The slightest misstep means a crushed toe or a snapped pulley rope that sends the block careening toward unsuspecting workers. Woodworkers coax furniture, boats, and door frames from imported cedar and native acacia. Their saws, simple copper blades with teeth filed individually, cut boards inch by inch. Bow-driven drill rigs bore holes for dowels, but blades dull quickly against dense wood, requiring constant resharpening on sandstone blocks. A carpenter's bench is a low platform of palm logs. His workshop is open air, meaning wind blows sand in every joint and crevice of his nascent chest of drawers. Potters shape clay on hand-turned wheels, slow and uncertain, spinning bowls, jars, and figurines that must dry in the sun before firing. Kilns are simple mud brick mounds with no temperature control. Uneven heat means many pots crack or shatter. Yet surviving wares, delicate faience beads, bright glazed tiles, and intricately painted amphorae testify to remarkable skill in the face of such primitive technology. Textile production begins in fields with flax fibers, separated, spun on drop spindles, and woven on upright looms. A spinner might produce only a few meters of thread per day. Weaving a single linen shift can take weeks. Dyes come from crushed insects, red caramies, roots, madder, or imported plants, indigo, all labor-intensive to extract and apply. The resulting fabric may look exquisite in a noble's robe, but every stage, from agriculture to spinning to dyeing, relies on sweat, repetitive motion, and razor-sharp tools that shred calloused hands. Even simple machines, levers, ramps, pulleys, are improvised from wood, rope, and stone. There is no iron. Steel is millennia away. Large-scale projects require careful organization. Overseers record quotas on mud tablets. Scribes monitor supplies. And the pharaoh's administrators allocate rations, tools, and workspace. One failure, a shortage of copper chisels or a late shipment of cedar, can halt entire construction sites, leaving laborers idle under the punishing sun. For a modern individual accustomed to power tools, CNC machines, and digital design, this world is a crucible of manual endurance. Every accomplishment, from a single pottery shard to an obelisk soaring toward the sky, stands as a monument not just to creativity, but to the relentless willpower of those pressed into service by necessity and authority. Surviving one sunrise to witness such feats is extraordinary. Surviving a full day to contribute meaningfully to them borders on the miraculous. In a world without highways or digital dispatch, getting from point A to B is a test of patience, stamina, and luck. Imagine setting out at dawn to visit the nearest market. A 10-kilometer trek along a narrow track, pitted by donkey hooves and littered with broken pottery shards. Barefoot or in flimsy sandals, your feet strike sharp stones. Each step kicks up dust that coats your throat and rattles in your lungs. The simplest conveyance is the donkey, lean, sure-footed, but fickle. You lead yours by a fraying rope looped through its nose ring, coaxing it forward with cracked barley rations. If it balks, you risk prodding with a hooked stick, quick bursts of fear that accelerate your heartbeat and leave you swearing you'd rather carry your basket of onions on your back. Donkeys towed in pairs haul small wooden carts, but these squeal and clatter over ruts, jarring joints with every bump. Slats loosen, and the axle often jams, requiring you to unload 50 kilos of produce, lift the cart off its wheels, and reseat it in the baking sun. For longer journeys, the Nile is your superhighway, but not without peril. You board a wooden felucca carved from acacia, its hull cracked and patched with pitch. The sail, a coarse patchwork of linen, snaps noisily when the gusts catch it, threatening to tear free and send you tumbling into muddy water. You work the oars in unison with fellow passengers, sweat mingling with the briny spray as the prow slices through waves stirred by crocodiles and breezes that carry the stench of fish markets upriver. A sudden squall can capsize the craft, sending cargo and travelers into the swirling current. Bridges over irrigation canals are absent. Instead, you clamber down narrow banks, ford knee-deep water, and scale mounds of silt on the opposite side. Wet sandals slip, Mud suctions at your ankles like a living thing. During flood season, crossings vanish entirely under broad sheets of water, forcing you to detour 20 kilometers to the nearest ferry. That ferry is a rickety platform of logs lashed together, one overloaded passenger or jostle, and it lists dangerously. Messages travel even slower. Without pigeons or couriers on horseback, news is carried by relay of footmen and river messengers. To dispatch a letter, you ink papyrus, roll it, seal it with clay stamped by your personal signet ring, and entrust it to a scribe in the next village. Expect days or weeks for reply, if it arrives at all. In the meantime, travels are governed by word of mouth. A single misheard phrase can lead you in circles through the desert. Road construction is minimal. Compacted earth and gravel make highways, but maintenance is rare. Sandstorms bury markers and dry rains wash away trenches, turning solid ground into quagmires that swallow wagons. Mileposts of limestone stand chipped and leaning, inscriptions worn smooth by wind-blown grit. At night, with no lanterns along the way, you navigate by starlight and chance, praying you won't stumble into venomous snakes or stray into a beggar's trap. For a modern commuter conditioned by paved roads, subway systems, and instant messaging, every journey here is an ordeal. The sun bakes your skin, the dust blurs your vision, and the constant unpredictability turns a simple visit into a high-stakes expedition. Surviving one day of ancient Egyptian travel requires stamina, resourcefulness, and a death-defying willingness to accept that your ride may very well end in the river. Twice a year, the relentless cycle of toil gives way, briefly, to spectacle. Festivals in ancient Egypt are more than colorful distractions. They're acts of cosmic renewal, state propaganda, and communal catharsis rolled into one blistering carnival. For a modern soul-craving Coachella, prepare instead for dust-choked processions, jostling crowds, and sun-scorched revelry that tests every ounce of stamina. Take the Opet Festival in Thebes. At dawn, thousands crowd the temple precinct of Karnak, their voices rising in a low rumble as priests haul the sacred barki of Amun-Re from its shrine. The boat glints with gold leaf, its prow carved like a divine falcon's beak. You push through men shoulder to shoulder, inhaling a heady fog of incense, myrrh, frankincense, and balsam that stings your eyes and coats your lungs. Drum beats boom against stone columns, sandals scuff on broken limestone, and trumpets made of silver emit piercing calls that echo across the river. Bystanders jostle for a glimpse, waving palm fronds dyed green to symbolize rebirth. Vendors hawk smoky skewers of duck and sticky date cakes, their carts rumbling wheels over sand. The smell of roasting meat mingles uneasily with sweaty bodies and latrine stench. Children perched on their parents' shoulders clutch ceramic flasks of sweet wine, spilling drops that stain white linen tunics pink. At midday, the bark is loaded onto a larger vessel and ferried upstream to Luxor Temple. The journey involves hauling massive ropes along canal banks, peasants and craftsmen pressed into unpaid service, sweat pouring like Nile floodwaters from every pore. Flies dive bomb their faces, sunstroke sidelines the weakest. If you collapse, you risk trampling by the kicking oxen yoked to ceremonial sledges. When night falls, torches ignite in an ocean of dancing flames. Music swells, lyres strum, tambourines jingle, and singers chant the myth of Isis, restoring Osiris's body. Revelers dance until dawn, their feet blistered and dusty, their throats raw from shouting. Yet the festival's climax, the reenactment of the pharaoh's coronation, unites commoner and lord in a fleeting triumph over the desert's indifference. By the final day, exhaustion and dehydration claim many. The sacred statues return to Karnak beneath a blood-red sunrise, and the crowds disperse in silence, bodies aching, linen stiff with grime. For a modern festival goer, used to padded VIP sections and climate-controlled comfort, This ancient rite is a baptism of fire, and one you'd be lucky to survive through before collapsing face first into the sand. At the pinnacle of this rigid society stands the pharaoh, a living deity whose every hour is scripted by protocol, politics, and peril. From the moment he awakens in his gilded bedchamber, his day unfolds as a tightly choreographed performance. Priests chant hymns in adjacent chambers, invoking Ra's blessing. High-ranking officials assemble to present petitions. Cupbearers pour water scented with lotus blossoms for his morning ablutions. He rises on a platform carried by 4 nobles, each step ritualized to symbolize the dawn's emergence from chaos. His linen kilt is not the ragged garment of the peasant, but a multi-layered masterpiece of bleached fine linen, pleated into perfect accordion folds, a garment that takes hours for palace seamstresses to arrange. Gold bracelets clasp his wrists. A cedarwood staff rests in his hand, signifying authority over Upper and Lower Egypt. Breakfast is a private affair. Platters of honey-glazed figs, fresh goat's cheese, and sweet wine aged in alabaster amphorae. Yet even this meal is a state ritual. Food tasters sample every dish to guard against poisoning, and herbalists stand by to administer antidotes if needed. A single misstep, a delayed offering to sekhmet, or a whispered rumor of disloyalty can turn court favor into lethal suspicion. After breakfast, audiences begin. Commoners, nobles, and foreign envoys file in, each presenting gifts, jars of incense, rare minerals, drafted treaties, to curry favor or seek redress. The pharaoh hears pleas for tax relief, land disputes, and temple grants. His yes or no ripples through the bureaucracy, instantly affecting the lives of millions of peasants preparing fields and artisans awaiting commissions. Court intrigue simmers beneath every corner. The vizier, second only to the king, juggles administrative duties with the ever-present threat of palace betrayal. Generals fresh from Nubia or Sinai campaigns seek promotions. Priests of Amun-Ra vie for added tribute and expanded temple estates. Spies, disguised as servants or foreign merchants, carry whispered secrets from one chamber to the next. An overheard insult, a misinterpreted signet ring, or a late offering to Mut can prompt a swift and often fatal fall from grace. By midday, a tepid breeze drifts through open colonnades, carrying incense smoke and the faint cries of children in the royal nursery. The pharaoh breaks for a sculpting lesson, honing limbs of a royal statue destined for the Valley of the Kings, or oversees the sculptor's work on a new obelisk. Even this leisure is part of his divine role, reinforcing his image as builder and unifier. As afternoon shadows lengthen, state business resumes. Tax inspectors report grain yields. Temple accountants present ledgers. Military commanders outline border patrols. Decisions are made in minutes, but implemented over months, damming canals, dispatching boats, or redirecting labor gangs. A single decree can redirect thousands of workers from farming to tomb building, shifting the balance between nourishment and monumental glory. When sunset paints the Nile blood red, the pharaoh retires to private chambers for evening rituals, offerings to his ancestors, and silent prayers for Ma'at, cosmic harmony. Only then does he glimpse the private fears beneath the divine facade, the envy of rivals, the weight of eternal legacy, and the knowledge that, despite godly status, one blade in the dark could end this all. Even for a modern conqueror, a single day in such a gilded cage would feel less like triumph and more like an unrelenting trial of power, paranoia, and the ever-ticking clock of mortality. In a world where survival depends on communal effort and rigid roles, family and community ties offer both solace and suffocation. From infancy, your identity is bound to kin, your Merit daughter of Abju, not an individual with personal dreams. Namesakes and ancestors loom large. Your parents' deeds affect your reputation. And you carry the burden of maintaining the household's honor before gods and neighbors. Childhood is a trial by apprenticeship. girls learn weaving, cooking, and herbal lore by age 7, standing on wooden stools beside their mothers as they pound grain or tend goats. Boys shadow their fathers into the fields, learning irrigation techniques by watching dikes breach and be rebuilt under the scorch of midday sun. Education, and by extension, opportunity, is passed down linearly, ensuring the peasant class remains rooted in the mud. Extended families share one-room homes, 3 generations huddle through heat and cold, raising goats, children, and debts side by side. When illness strikes, everyone rallies to carry water, prepare salves, or sit by the fire chanting protective spells. In return, those same family bonds enforce conformity. A single act of defiance, refusing to work temple land, disputing a neighbor, or marrying outside the caste, can fracture a lineage's standing, causing whispers that echo for decades. Above all, there's an ever-present dread of divine disfavor. You pray daily for health, safety, and mayat, cosmic harmony that underpins existence. But if your crops fail or your child falls ill, you interpret it as a sign of wrongdoing by someone in your circle. Suspicion breeds fear. Finger-pointing can erupt into fights over stolen water rights, adulterous rumors, or accusations of sorcery. A communal feast can turn into a shouting match if libations are spilled on a sacred statue. Psychologically, the constant vigilance and communal pressure weigh heavily. There's no private grief. Sacrifices, births, and funerals are public performances. Your sorrow is shared, but so is your shame. A misfortune isn't just personal, it's a stain on the entire family's name. Overhearing neighbors whisper, "mummy fodder," the local slang for the permanently disgraced, can haunt you until your final breath. For a modern individual accustomed to personal space, therapy options, and the idea of forging one's own path, the baked earth bonds of an Egyptian village can feel both comforting and claustrophobic. Surviving a single day here demands not only physical endurance, but an ironclad capacity for communal sacrifice and emotional containment. Any moment of private despair or unchecked anger risks shattering the fragile threads that hold your world together. Even amid relentless labor and elemental threats, the Egyptians poured their souls into art, expressions of faith, power, and an unyielding desire to transcend mortality. Murals and reliefs cover temple walls from floor to vaulted ceiling, each stroke of pigment applied by skilled artisans hunched on scaffolds under flickering oil lamps. Their palettes, reds from ochre, blues from ground azurite, greens from malachite, retain surprising vibrancy. But each hue requires crushing, washing, and filtering mineral dust in repetitive, backbreaking processes. In tombs, scenes of everyday life, farmers harvesting grain, fishermen casting nets, children at play, are rendered with meticulous precision. Yet these idyllic depictions belie the cruel reality. The very artists who celebrated bounty often endured grueling quotas, carving lines into limestone by torchlight and rising before dawn to grind more pigments. Mistakes are unforgiving. A misaligned chisel stroke or a streak of diluted resin can condemn a tomb's decoration to mediocrity, jeopardizing the afterlife comforts of the deceased sponsor and the reputation of the artist. Sculptors work granite, basalt, and sandstone into statues meant to house a soul's ka. They labor with copper tools against stone harder than any metal they possess, hammering for months to coax out the divine image of a pharaoh or god. Polishing the surface involves rubbing abrasive sand and water in endless cycles until the rock gleams like polished bronze. Each statue embodies the belief that art itself is an act of devotion. Yet every sculpture exacts a toll in fractured chisels, scorched lungs, and calloused hands raw from continuous abrasion. Papyrus scrolls preserve hymns, medical treatises, and mathematical tables, their thin fibers pressed into sheets so delicate that a single droplet of water can dissolve the ink. Scribes copy these works by candlelight, inhaling smoke that irritates their throats and lungs. Their labor ensures the survival of knowledge, but it also traps them in cycles of repetitive transcription that leave little room for creativity. Innovation is constrained by the need for consistency in sacred texts. Music and dance, though ephemeral, feature in elite ceremonies and funerary rites. Harpists pluck strings fashioned from animal gut. Drummers pound calfskin skins stretched over clay frames. Dancers in linen skirts enact mythic dramas under torchlit halls. Yet outside grand temples, wood for instruments is scarce, and livestock for hides is precious. Entire herds are sometimes slaughtered to supply drumheads for a single festival, a sacrifice that underscores the stark trade-offs between cultural expression and subsistence. Across the land, artisans experiment with glassmaking. Faience beads are cast in molds, then fired to produce a vivid turquoise glaze that evokes the life-giving Nile. Each bead is cleaned, polished, strung, and blessed. An alchemy of labor, spirituality, and technology. Yet even this miniature of heaven comes at a price. The charcoal kilns burn incessantly, blackening the air and consuming wood that could otherwise fuel cooking fires. Every artifact, every melody, every architectural feat carries the imprint of human endurance against a harsh world. For a modern observer accustomed to mass production and digital storage, the notion that each object is handmade, each note manually tuned, and each text painstakingly inscribed would be both awe-inspiring and terrifying. To witness the birth of Egypt's cultural legacy is to confront the paradoxless beauty forged through suffering, and to understand why a modern soul, craving comfort and convenience, would falter long before the first sculpture was complete. In ancient Egypt, the state's insatiable appetite for resources shapes every aspect of life. From peasant hut to palace hall, the invisible hand of bureaucracy twists muscles and pockets alike, extracting grain, labor, and loyalty to fund temples, royal tombs, and military campaigns. For a modern taxpayer accustomed to electronic filings and annual invoices, the daily grind of Egyptian taxation is an ever-present shadow. At harvest's end, you kneel before a scribe seated on a raised platform. He unwraps a papyrus scroll listing quotas set by the nomarch and the temple priesthood. You must surrender up to a third of your barley and emmer wheat, sometimes more if the inundation was insufficient, plus additional levies in beer, oil, and livestock. Fail to meet the quota, and you risk corvée labor, weeks of unpaid service hauling stone for temple foundations, or repairing canal embankments with nothing but your flayed back to show for it. Corvée isn't optional. It's the backbone of the state's workforce. Every able-bodied adult may be conscripted for a month, often during the inundation when fields lie fallow. You're issued a wooden badge, an ID tag inscribed with your name, village, and assigned gang number that you must wear pinned to your kilt. Miss roll call and you face whipping, loss of rations, or forced exile to distant quarries where the sun's cruelty is rivaled only by the overseer's rod. Meanwhile, the scribes and administrators revel in relative ease, translating field reports into tax ledgers and issuing decrees that direct where corvée laborers will build new dikes or clear sand from temple courtyards. They rewrite bureaucratic codes almost daily to reflect changing needs, from redistributing grain during lean years to collecting special royal gifts for jubilant festivals. Each decree, once sealed with the pharaoh's signet and posted outside the governor's residence, becomes law, immutable, immediate, and unforgiving. Corruption seeps in like sand through cracked walls. A bribe of oil jars or fine linen can reduce your tax bill or shorten your labor conscription. But bribery is a gamble. If caught, both briber and bribe taker face public flogging and confiscation of property. Transparency is a myth. Most transactions occur in whispered negotiations behind temple pillars or under the cover of night. Even nobles aren't immune. High officials pay tribute to maintain favor, funneling portions of their estate's yields into royal coffers. Provincial governors must send annual gifts of exotic goods, ivory from Nubia, incense from Punt, gold from mines in the eastern desert, or risk demotion and disgrace. Their luxury comes at the expense of deeper taxes levied on commoners, perpetuating a cycle where the state's wealth is built upon the backs of its most vulnerable. By day's end, you tally your remaining grain, enough to feed your family for a few weeks at most. You glance at the badge hanging limp on your waist, a reminder of your obligations tomorrow and the day after, to bow to the scribe's pen, bear the overseer's lash, and haul enough weight to build monuments that you will never see completed. In this world, the machinery of administration is a relentless force, grinding ordinary lives into the bedrock of empire, and even a single sunrise can feel like an eternity under its weight. Beneath the veneer of religious ritual and manual toil lies a surprising bedrock of practical science, an engineering prowess that marries observation with rigorous arithmetic. Yet, for a modern person, the lack of symbolic notation and digital tools turns every calculation into a mental marathon with dire stakes. One misplaced digit can ruin a temple foundation or flood an entire field. Egyptian math begins with the humble unit fraction system. Every rational number is expressed as a sum of reciprocals, ones for 2, ones for 3, ones for 5, etc., making even simple divisions laborious. A scribe tasked with apportioning grain among 10 workers must convert shares like 3/10 into 1c5 plus 1/10, requiring cross-multiplication and comparison of hieratic symbols. Papyrus scrolls such as the Rind mathematical papyrus reveal problems on area calculations, volumes of cylindrical granaries, and geometric progressions for pyramid slopes. Yet each problem is worked out in longhand, with red ink corrections and no eraser, under flickering oil lamps that threaten to singe the precious scrolls. Surveying land after the annual flood falls to the Harpidanapte, rope stretchers, whose simple cord and plumb method lays out right angles for fields and construction sites. They anchor stakes, run ropes taut, and measure by knotted lengths, counting paces to record dimensions. Without standardized units, measures vary by region. The cubit can be between 52 and 54 centimeters, forcing constant calibration of wooden rods and metal gauges. A misaligned angle or variant cubit can cause walls to lean or canals to misdirect water, imperiling harvests or toppling columns. Astronomy plays an equally critical role. Egyptian skywatchers chart the heliacal rising of Sirius, but they also track Deacon stars, 36 star groups representing 10-day weeks, to create a rudimentary yet effective sidereal clock. Temple ceilings painted with decanal constellations serve both as religious iconography and as calendars for priests to time rituals. Without telescopes, they rely on naked eye observations and shadow-casting gnomons, vertical rods, to gauge solstices and equinoxes, vital markers for scheduling festivals and adjusting irrigation. Engineering feats like the construction of the Giza pyramids or the canals of Fayum demonstrate mastery of simple machines, levers, inclined planes, and counterweights. Yet every calculation, whether determining the slope of a ramp or the volume of fill needed for a causeway, is rendered using line diagrams scratched in red ochre on limestone pallets. Mistakes are costly. Collapsed ramp sections, cracked blocks, or uneven foundations can set projects back months, condemning laborers to repeat grueling work under an unforgiving sun. For a modern engineer accustomed to CAD software, laser levels, and digital libraries of material science, this world of rope-strewn quarries and hand-copied scrolls feels archaic and perilous. Surviving one day at the forefront of Egyptian innovation means embracing uncertainty, performing mental gymnastics under pressure, and shouldering responsibility for every calculation in an environment that tolerates no margin for error. Not all laborers in ancient Egypt were peasants bound by taxes. Many were slaves, forced captives whose lives teetered on the edge of dehumanization. Prisoners of war from Nubia or Libya, rounded up during military campaigns, were shackled at the wrists and neck, marched across desert sands under the whip of Egyptian guards. Their chains clinked with each step, a grim annunciation of freedom lost forever. Once sold at bustling slave markets, often held within temple precincts, These captives exchanged hands for copper rings, jars of grain, or even debt forgiveness. Buyers examined teeth, muscles, and scars as if choosing livestock. Men deemed strong were assigned to quarry gangs or pyramid crews, hauling multi-ton blocks. Women were sent to noble households as domestic servants, or to temple complexes as ritual workers, scraping stone basins clean at dawn. Children born to slaves inherited bondage, baptized into a lifetime of unpaid labor. Owners could be merciful. Some household slaves lived in relative comfort, wore linen kilts, and learned craft skills, but the majority endured brutal oversight. Failure to meet a quota invited beatings with wooden rods tipped with metal. Attempting escape was punished by impalement or branding. Overseers kept detailed tallies carved into wooden boards. Any error risked deadly repercussions, since loss of state property was tantamount to treason. Debt slavery blurred lines between voluntary servitude and coercion. A peasant unable to pay taxes might sell himself or family members to a wealthy landowner in exchange for grain or livestock, signing a clay contract before two witnesses. Although bondage could theoretically end after a set term or upon repayment, harsh interest rates, hidden fees, and crop failures often prolonged servitude indefinitely. Even temple slaves, those dedicated to gods, lived under strict rules. Assigned enclosures called houses of silence, they labored to produce linen for priests' robes, chanted hymns at dawn, and slept on reed mats without blankets. Their only prospects lay in the gods' mercy. A favorable ritual or divine intervention etched on temple walls promised freedom in the afterlife, but earthly liberation remained a distant hope. For a modern observer used to human rights discourse and labor protections, ancient Egyptian slavery is shockingly arbitrary and omnipresent. No international conventions, no legal advocates, no appeals to conscience, only the whims of owners, the decrees of pharaohs, and the ever-present possibility of the slave collar's icy metal biting into flesh. Even surviving sunrise to sunset under such bonds is an achievement. Imagining a future beyond nightfall, beyond the next overseer's call, feels like the most daring act of all. Surviving in ancient Egypt hinges on mastering, or at least enduring, the intricate dance of water management, a system of canals, basins, and devices that diverts the mighty Nile across parched fields. Without these feats of hydraulic engineering, the desert would reclaim everything, and your meager grain harvest would shrivel under the sun's glare. At dawn, canal workers wade into waist-deep channels, shovel in hand, cutting away silt deposits left by last year's flood. The canal gates, rudimentary wooden sluices bound in rope, are pried open to fill irrigation basins. These basins, rectangular depressions surrounded by low earthen embankments, trap water long enough for it to seep into the soil, rather than rushing off to waste. A miscalculation, opening a gate too widely, floods neighboring plots, ruins germinating seedbeds, and invites the nomarcha's wrath. Beyond basins lie shade-offs, counterbalanced pole and bucket contraptions that lurch under the weight of Nile water. A farmer lifts a loaded clay bucket with one hand while pushing down on a heavy stone counterweight with the other. When the bucket tips over the field's edge, his arm trembles from the repetitive strain. No mechanical advantage here beyond basic leverage. After hours, every muscle burns, and blisters form on palms and fingertips. The state allocates water rights through meticulously recorded rotation schedules. You receive water in your basin for a prescribed 2-day term. No more, no less. Before the canal gate is closed to supply your neighbor downstream. Scribes record your water term on leather tags looped around wooden pegs at the canal's head, and overseers patrol the banks, ensuring no one tampers with sluices. Open a gate out of turn, and you're fined or drafted into corvée if you can't pay. Maintaining these canals demands constant vigilance. Cracks in embankments leak water into the sand, creating sinkholes that swallow livestock. Borrow pits, trenches cut too deep, become mosquito breeding grounds, spreading malaria. During the inundation, temporary canals burst their banks, washing away homes and scattering grain sacks into knee-deep swirls of mud. Even at night, sluices must be monitored. Flashing lanterns reveal dark silhouettes of water thieves, desperate peasants digging unauthorized irrigation channels to save their crops, only to be chased off by barking dogs and overseers carrying torches. A single bungled canal repair can spell famine for your entire village. For a modern person used to electric pumps, sealed pipelines, and automated sprinkler controls, this hands-on stake-in-the-ground approach feels archaic and brutal. Every drop of water is hard-won, and surviving one day under this system requires endless physical labor, precise timing, and the humility to bend entirely to the will of the Nile. In the flickering half-light of an oil lamp, an Egyptian family gathers to hear the epic of Osiris and Seth, an ancient drama of brotherly betrayal, murder, and divine justice. Storytellers, their voices rising and falling like the Nile itself, employ drum beats on clay frames and finger cymbals to punctuate each twist of fate. For a modern listener accustomed to surround sound and CGI, this raw, oral theater feels both intimate and unnerving. The tale begins in sweet, perfumed air, Isis plucking lotus blossoms on the Nile's edge, their fragrance heavy in the humid dusk. You can almost taste the moisture on your tongue as the storyteller describes Osiris reclining in a barge carved like a crocodile's back. Then the mood shifts. Seth's sinister laughter echoes against papyrus reeds. A crack of thunder rolls across temple basements, and you shiver despite the oven-like room. Myths serve as moral compasses and mnemonic devices, encoding religious principles and cultural norms into unforgettable narratives. A peasant child learns that Mayat, balance, truth, and justice, is preserved when injustice is punished, as Seth's followers meet gruesome ends under Horus's spear. Meanwhile, gamblers at the local tavern reference these same stories with levity, likening a crooked game of Senate to Seth's dishonesty, drawing laughter amid the dank smoke and stale beer. Temple walls transform myth into permanent spectacle. In the hypostyle hall of Karnak, colossal reliefs depict the solar bark's nightly journey through the underworld, its prow guarded by serpents to repel demons. Priests reenact these scenes during nocturnal rites, chanting alongside flickering braziers that throw gigantic shadows on stone. An immersive drama far more visceral than any modern theater. Yet storytelling isn't limited to gods. Tales of cunning craftsmen, heroic hunts, and star-crossed lovers circulate among laborers. One favorite recounts a humble fisherman who outwits a crocodile by tricking it into swallowing a stone, then escapes its belly by cutting his way out. An adventure that elicits gasps from children clustered around the fire. These legends, carried in memory rather than scrolls, morph with each retelling, reflecting local dialects, seasonal events, and even last week's flooding. Oral tradition also codifies practical knowledge. A riddle poem, recited with clapping, teaches flood prediction by observing the behavior of cattle on the riverbank. A lullaby about the winged ibis nesting in marshes doubles as bird-calling instruction for feasting expeditions. Through myth and verse, knowledge of irrigation, medicine, and star lore weaves seamlessly into the cultural fabric. For a modern person raised on instant entertainment and mass media, this world of live, communal storytelling demands emotional investment, collective imagination, and tolerance for discomfort. Smoke-choked air, crowded courtyards, the unpredictability of live performance. Surviving one day here means opening your senses to narrative power unmediated by screens, ready to have your heart race by a drummer's beat or chilled by the hiss of a storyteller's whisper. Before you ever draw a breath in ancient Egypt, your arrival is already fraught with peril. Labor takes place at home on a reed mat, midwives crouched at your mother's side like anxious birds. The air inside the hut is thick with incense smoke. Mandrake root and myrrh burn to ward off malevolent spirits, and damp with the steam of boiled herbs. Your mother grips a birchwood staff carved with protective symbols of Taweret, goddess of childbirth, while two midwives press hot compresses of date pulp and natron clay against her lower belly to ease contractions. When the first cry finally pierces the humid air, there's relief, but only momentary. You're immediately wrapped in a coarse linen swaddling cloth, dusted with fragrant oils to prevent infection, then rubbed vigorously to stimulate breathing. Umbilical cords are cut with a flint blade, sterilized only by smoky embers, and clamped with a simple knot of linen. Any tear or delay risks postpartum hemorrhage, and women often bleed out before help can arrive. Infant mortality looms over every cradle. 1 in 3 children never sees their 5th birthday, felled by diarrhea from contaminated water, respiratory infections in drafty huts, or sudden fevers, malaria or dysentery with no effective treatment. When a babe falls ill, midwives mix herbal brews of willow bark and pomegranate husks, chanting incantations to Sekhmet for healing. Yet blind faith can't always stave off the fever, and tiny bodies sometimes slip away beneath the thin reed roof, inserting grief like a blade into the family's heart. Surviving infancy grants you entry into a precarious childhood. At 6, boys begin field work, carrying water jars on their heads, scuffing across dusty fields, hunching to plant seeds. Girls of the same age assist in weaving and grinding grain, their hands already calloused. School is a privilege reserved for a few. Most learn oral proverbs and practical skills through observation, never opening a papyrus scroll. Every milestone, first steps, first words, is celebrated with small offerings at the household shrine. A handful of barley, a drop of beer, and a prayer that the child's spirit remains anchored to the world of the living. Yet the specter of grief never fully lifts. Wooden toys shaped like animals rot in the sun, tiny linen dresses fray in the dust, and gravestones for children are etched with trembling hieroglyphs, promising eternal watchfulness by protective deities. For a modern parent used to pediatricians, vaccination schedules, and baby monitors, the cacophony of dangers, unsanitary birth practices, rampant disease, backbreaking chores assigned at dawn, would make even a single day of parenthood feel like an act of defiance against fate. In this land where life is so fragile, every breath is a victory, every childhood a fleeting triumph against the unyielding desert and the merciless gods. By now you may be wondering, with so many horrors and hardships, why did ancient Egypt endure for millennia? The answer lies in an intricate balance of environmental mastery, religious cohesion, and bureaucratic domination. An apparatus so well oiled that it absorbed occasional crop failures, revolts, and palace coups without collapsing. Yet for a modern person plucked from our comfortable world, even a single day inside this juggernaut is enough to break body, mind, and spirit. Consider your morning. After crawling from your reed mat, you've already scrubbed yourself with gritty natron paste, swallowed mud-flavored porridge, and survived a half hour of biting flies without modern repellent. You've hauled silt in a woven basket strapped to your back, plunged your hands into stagnant canal water, risking schistosomiasis, and dodged crocodiles on your way home, all before most of us have checked our email. Your afternoon brings its own trials, hypothermic chills as desert wind scours your thin cloak, sun-blistered skin stinging where linen failed to cover you, and the mental strain of knowing a single misstep, opening that canal gate a fraction too long or angering an overseer, could mean lash, debt bondage, or worse. You've navigated labyrinthine tax decrees, endured prayer rituals that last hours without shade, and still must find water, weave mats, cook dinner, and lull a crying infant to sleep with no analgesics or pediatric care. Socially, you exist under the microscope of communal honor. Every uttered word, every stumble in the marketplace, every spilled drop of beer at a festival is noticed, judged, and recorded. Perhaps whispered back to the Pharaoh's scribes by informants seeking favor. Spiritual surveillance is no less invasive. Household gods demand constant libations, temple offerings, and ritual purity. A single taboo broken, eating forbidden fish or neglecting to anoint your shrine, invites disease and divine retribution. At night, your hammock of woven reeds offers little warmth against desert cold, and the cries of hippos, jackals, and scorpions lull you into a half-doze punctuated by nightmares of mummification and enslavement. Sleep itself is an act of trust in a world where fate is governed by shifting sands, capricious deities, and the ever-present will of the pharaoh. In this crucible, the very act of living, breathing, eating, moving, thinking, requires endless vigilance, ceaseless labor, and unbreakable faith. A modern human, accustomed to air-conditioned offices, scheduled breaks, medical clinics, and legal protections, would find every hour here a fresh affront to body and mind. Stripped of conveniences we take for granted, we'd crumble under the oppressive heat, the stench of stale water, the weight of social expectation, and the terrifying omnipresence of death. And that, ultimately, is why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. Not because the people there lacked resilience, they were among the greatest builders and thinkers of their time, but because the very fabric of their world is woven from threads of hardship so extreme that even a single sunrise would test your limits beyond anything imaginable. As the first light of dawn creeps over the desert horizon, casting long shadows across weathered monuments, you stand amid the ruins and confront an unsettling truth. The very grandeur that inspires wonder today was built on relentless toil, rigid hierarchy, and daily battles against nature, disease, and divine decree. Those colossal pyramids, glittering temples, and vibrant tomb paintings are not mere relics of a romanticized past, but monuments to human endurance at its most extreme. Modern tourists stroll beneath columns carved with hieroglyphs, snapping photos on smartphones that capture millennia of history in a single swipe. Yet each image belies the millions of labor hours, measured in shovel strokes, chisel blows, and bleary-eyed dawns, that transformed rough stone into immortal art. Every surviving papyrus scroll and shard of faience bead embodies countless acts of concentration amid heat, flies, and the ever-present threat of violence or infection. Today's global society benefits from the Nile's ancient innovations. Irrigation techniques still inform farming. Medical papyri foreshadowed antiseptics and surgical splints. Mathematical papyri taught geometry and fractions. Yet, it's easy to forget that these breakthroughs emerged not in laboratories, but in harsh fields, scorching quarries and crowded temples, where mistakes meant cramps, broken bones, or death. For the modern individual, this reflection sparks both admiration and relief. We honor the Egyptians' legacy in art, architecture, and knowledge, even as we recoil from their daily realities. Barter for water, razor-sharp copper tools, baked clay dwellings, and brutal laws. In our climate-controlled homes, we breathe filtered air. In our clinics, we trust antibiotics. In our courts, we rely on due process and rights. These comforts, which we deem fundamental, were inconceivable luxuries 4,000 years ago. Stepping back into our world, we carry the echoes of those ancient lives, the wisdom of balancing community cohesion with individual agency, the recognition that progress often rides on the sacrifices of the many, and the humbling awareness that even the greatest civilizations demand a cost. Ancient Egypt offers a mirror, reflecting how far humanity has come, and reminding us how tenuous the line is between stability and collapse. So, the next time you gaze upon a pyramid's perfect silhouette against the sunset, pause to imagine the sweat and struggle embedded in each block. Then give thanks for air conditioning, clean water, and legal protections. And remember, if you think your commute was tough this morning, surviving just one day in ancient Egypt would have tested you in ways your modern life can hardly fathom. As you step away from the ruins, let's pause for a moment to reckon with what surviving a single day in ancient Egypt demands, and what that teaches us today. Imagine waking before dawn, not to an alarm app, but to the nagging ache of old bones and the prick of insect bites. There's no swiping a card to buy coffee. You gulp muddy Nile water or gritty beer to stay alive. Your commute is a forced march through dust and silt. Your office a sun-baked field or a stone quarry where failure means the overseer's lash. Yet despite, or because of, these relentless trials, Egyptian society produced staggering achievements. Architectural marvels that still inspire awe. Administrative systems that manage millions. Medical papyri revealing surprisingly advanced treatments for fractures and infections. How did they do it? By forging a collective resilience, subordinating personal comfort to communal goals, and embedding every task, whether stirring a stew pot or hauling granite, in a framework of cosmic purpose. In our modern world, we celebrate efficiency and individual freedom, often overlooking the value of shared sacrifice and the labor that underpins our conveniences. We chafe at brief delays or minor discomforts, forgetting that in the Nile Valley, a cracked mud wall or a broken sandal could spell ruin. The Egyptians remind us that progress is cumulative. Monumental pyramids rose only because countless hands accepted hardship as ordinary. Applying these lessons doesn't mean enduring slavery or drinking silt-laden water, but we can cultivate gratitude for the amenities we possess, empathy for those whose daily realities are still grueling, and a sense of perspective when our worst days seem insurmountable. Next time you're stuck in traffic or waiting in line, recall the Egyptian worker wading through ankle-deep floodwater, sweat stinging his eyes, driven onward by the threat of punishment or starvation. His day was defined by extremes. You can handle a few minutes of inconvenience. History warns that comfort can breed complacency. The Egyptians built monumental temples with no modern tools, yet they also enslaved and subjugated. We must strive for progress that honors both human dignity and collective achievement. If we harness our technological prowess with the Egyptians' communal spirit, while rejecting their harsh hierarchies, we might build a society that's both advanced and humane. So, could you last a day in ancient Egypt? Probably not. But by understanding their world, we gain insight into our own. The fragility of civilization, the power of shared endeavor, and the value of every drop of water, every grain of sand, and every hand that labors for the greater good. Keep these lessons close as you return to air-conditioned comfort, because history's greatest teachers often speak through the echoes of hardship. And so, as the desert sun climbs its final arc and shadows retreat from ancient stones, we draw our journey to a close. We've felt the sting of sand in our eyes, the weight of limestone blocks on our shoulders, and the chilling knowledge that a single misstep could mean death or disgrace. We've walked among gods, kings, and laborers, each step a testament to human will in the face of unrelenting hardship. But beyond the drama and the danger, remember that ancient Egypt's legacy wasn't just built of stone, it was built of people. Farmers who braved crocodile-infested waters, scribes who inked records by torchlight, artisans who coaxed art from dust, and visionaries who saw beyond the immediate toil to dream of eternity. Their world was harsh, their gods demanding, and their daily lives unthinkable by modern standards. And yet, they persevered, creating wonders that still draw our awe and curiosity. If you think you could last a day in ancient Egypt, share your thoughts in the comments. And let's debate where you'd fare best. Would you survive the heat of the fields, the sting of the scorpion's tail, or the vigil of the temple shrines? Be honest. I know I'd trade my smartphone for a canteen of filtered water in a heartbeat. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a world both alien and foundational to our own, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another journey through history's toughest trials. And if there's another civilization, or perhaps a moment in time, you'd like to see us survive for a day, drop a suggestion below. We just might take you there next. Thanks for watching Why You Wouldn't Last a Day in Ancient Egypt. Until next time, stay curious, stay grateful, and remember, sometimes the past's greatest gift is the perspective it gives us on the comforts we take for granted today. Good night, and may your air conditioner never fail you.